Be done on the earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session. Minutes for the meeting held on Tuesday, July 20th, 2021 to be confirmed.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the aforesaid minutes be confirmed.
Questions that the aforementioned minutes be confirmed. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned minutes are hereby confirmed.
Announcements by Your Honor, the Speaker. Messages from Her Excellency, the Governor General. Petitions. Papers. Any papers? Government notices. Private members' notices. Notices of questions. Reports from select committees. First readings of bills.
Honorable Leader, Government Business.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Corporate Miscellaneous Provisions Bill 2021.
Questions that the aforementioned bill be read the first time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Statements by ministers, congratulatory and/or obituary speeches, personal explanations, motions for leave of absence, oral replies to questions, notices of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance, orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of standing orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, subsection 5, 43, and 44 be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Questions that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is the order of the day.
Order number 2, in the name of the Honorable Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, to move the passing of a resolution to approve, in accordance with Section 5 of the Crown Lands Vesting and Disposal Act, Chapter 225, the vesting in the National Housing Corporation of a parcel of land situate at White Park Road and Country Road in the parish of St. Michael in this island, together with the buildings thereon, being the land of the former Louis Lynch Secondary School, for the purpose of the sale to the West India Biscuit Company Limited.
Honorable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Everybody, certainly in this House, and also those who may hear my voice, might be well aware of that bit of land on White Park. That was, I knew it as Roebuck Secondary, and it then became the Louis Lynch Secondary School. And it has not been in use for some time now. In fact, the students were removed from that school in 2006. And from that time to now, that property has remained in a dilapidated and disused state. In fact, Mr. Speaker, when I think of, and I think of it as Roebuck Secondary, when I think of Roebuck Secondary, I actually think of an 11-year-old schoolboy in 1979, journeying from Maryville Preparatory School to go to take the 11 plus examination at the then Roebuck Secondary School. And that young boy was me. And I met there people that I then met at my other school after taking that 11 plus. I actually met a lot of boys who were there from St. Cyprian's, a lot of boys who were also there from Bay Primary, actually, who were there taking the 11 plus examination. And those boys I'd met even at my 11 plus examination at the then Roebuck then went on to be lifelong friends up to this day. So it is not a simple thing for me to come to this honorable house and discuss this vesting and then by extension this sale, because that building played a very pivotal role in my life. Indeed, some would argue that the 11 plus examination at that time was the springboard on which many people's further careers were launched. But that is a debate for another time as I look at the Minister of Education. So what has happened, Mr. Speaker, is from the early 90s, people were complaining of environmental problems at that school. It was built in 1978, and from the early 80s, people were complaining about environmental problems. And it reached a crescendo in 2005, 2006 time, when in fact they had multiple members of the faculty and also of students who got ill, and a study was commissioned by the University of the West Indies. And the students were moved from that facility and never returned. And in 2006, the University of the West Indies study was commissioned, and that study essentially revealed that there was ethanol, kerosene, xylene, and percs present at the site. However, all of the chemicals that were found were totally within normal levels, and there was nothing above or exceeding the level of the chemicals. But of course, by that time, people had been moved. They developed a type of a stigma, if you will, about that site, and nobody really wanted to go back to the site. And we understand that. And what happened is, over the 15 years, that site has been used by vagrants. It has been a haven for mosquitoes, rats, you name it. It is a total health hazard for the whole community and for the whole country. And of course, with it being just so close to my current office at Country Road, I clearly made it very clear to my colleagues and to the National Housing Corporation that we had to do something about this site. You know, Mr. Speaker, we embarked in the ministry on a rejuvenation program. And in that rejuvenation program, we have so far started the rejuvenation of the court, which was a building that had been disused for a long period of time, and we're making good progress there. We also took on the Sanitation Service Authority building, and then government paid for that building to be improved, and we have now missed is now in that building, and we've made improvements there. We then had the gatehouse at the old Barbados Water Authority building. We have made the improvements there. The buildings unit, not the buildings unit, the QS department and also the building standards were supposed to go into that, and government has put resources there. Just a few days ago, the member for St. Michael West and myself journeyed to Country Road again, the old welfare building, and we started the rejuvenation project there. But it isn't all rejuvenation that has to be done by government. We have to understand that there are several other buildings that are not in use that can be brought back into good use. I brought to this house the leasing of the old Culloden farm to the Duke of Edinburgh Award Scheme. And that is moving at pace, so we can lease it to them so they can invest $4 million in bringing it back into use. So what I'm trying to get over to the Honorable House is, yes, government has to play a role in rejuvenation, in bringing back dilapidated buildings, in bringing buildings back into good use. But government is not the only entity that can get involved in bringing buildings back into use. We can also unleash the abilities and the capabilities of the private sector as well to be able to help us to get these buildings back into productive and profitable use. In fact, I often hear the minister in the Ministry of Finance, the member for Christchurch East Central, who often says that when we can bring stranded assets back into good use and into productive use, it augurs not only better for the employment of the country, not only better for the ability for us to take in the taxes, the land tax and the property transfer tax and the tax from it being a profitable business, but it also enhances the environment of the country and reduces the amount we have to spend on fogging, reduces the amount we have to spend on rodent control. All of these things are wins that we get when we can bring these buildings back into use. So we have done all of the assessments. We have gone back to the Environmental Protection Department. They have agreed that they have no objection to this sale going forward for this land and for these buildings. And at last, we will be able to put these buildings and this land back into productive use when it is onward sale then to the West India Biscuit Company. I understand that is their intention to use this area, especially the play park, to be able to develop their playing facilities. And where they currently have their field, they'll be able to expand their production and their industrial complex there at the West India Biscuit Company. So this is a positive for Barbados, a positive for the community, and a positive for not only for our local businesses, but also for export. Because as you know, West India Biscuit is one of the great exporters for Barbados. So I look forward to pushing ahead, once the Parliament agrees to having this vesting go forward, and by extension, this sale, that we'll be able to put this building back into good use as soon as possible. So therefore, Mr. Speaker, very simply, with those few words, I'd ask that this resolution do now pass.
Made to second that.
Maybe waiting a long time.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
No. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Our honorable friend out of Christchurch. The West was quite brief and said, I believe in his view, the necessary things. A couple of issues I would want to raise, and I would be as brief as I can. The Honorable Minister suggests a possible use of the compound at the former Louis Lynch or Robert Secondary School when acquired, or if acquired, by the BISCO. Now, government pulled out of there. It's school operations out of there. Nobody has been there ever since for any legitimate business purpose. I understand from the Honorable Minister some vagrants have occupied the place. Do not know if they have suffered any health injury as a result of having taken up occupancy there. But the question I really want to raise is, the statement I really want to make, is that having brought this to this House, I would have thought that the Minister would have been in a position to say to us with certainty the purpose to which the company proposed as owners of the property, the purpose to which they would put it to use, and that he would be able to speak with certainty as to that.
Honorable Mr. Speaker, it's point of order. Point of elucidation, I guess. Yes.
Honourable member for questions.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I don't know if the honourable member, maybe he did not hear, and I will repeat it again. What the proposed purchasers, because obviously I can only go on what they said at that time. I can't hold them to it, and certainly there's going to be no covenant, as far as I understand it, if the sale does go through. But what they've communicated to me is that they have a field. Remember, there is a drain between the two properties, their property and the Louis Lynch property. So what they propose to do, as they explained it to me, is that they're actually going to build on their field. So the expansion, because their field is adjacent to their property, they're building on their field, but they want to give back a field. So they're losing their field because they're building on their field. So therefore, they will then use the field of what was essentially the Louis Lynch School to be the new field to replace their field. So it's not that, what they communicate to me, it's not that they're going to do any expansion from a factory or anything point of view, but from the point of view of using it as a field because they're going to use up their field. That's what was explained to me.
Well, I thank the Honourable Minister, through you, Mr. Speaker, for attempting to clarify a bit. I did get the impression in his initial statement he had suggested that beyond the field to be used for recreational purposes, the other aspects of the operation would also be in existence over there. All right, so we are glad for the measure of clarification which he has given, although in my view, humbly I suggest, he's still speaking with some fair degree of uncertainty. And I think in a matter like this, if government is ridding itself of an asset and turning over property to a private entity interest, it should be as sure as it possibly can be as the purpose to which the property will be, especially when you're dealing with one which has had environmental problems to the extent that government abandoned it and nobody has used it for all these decades. And that's the only point I'm trying to make with reference to that. I suspect the owners, in attempting to acquire the land, would have tested out to some extent, to the extent that it is practicable and appropriate, the opinion of the environmental people and the tongue and country planning people as to the use to which this now abandoned site can be put. Again, especially considering that there were health issues prominently related to that. I believe, and I would hope the Minister of Education would support me in this view, this was an educational facility, and therefore any income revenue generated from it should be put back to educational use and purposes. One might argue that the Education Ministry gets the lion's share of that which government spends on an annual basis, as is indicated in the estimates of revenue and expenditure. But to the extent that this property was taken out of use for educational purposes, I believe the government should commit that this money goes back to the business of education, because we can surely use it. Now, Mr. Speaker, akin to that is this view. It must have been in the intention of the government of the then day, when the school was built and the facility was established, it must have been thought needful and advisable to establish a secondary school in this area. Now, I do not know that we have, to any extent, replaced the Louis Lynch Secondary School in urban Barbados. I think we have had maybe one or two additional schools built since that one was abandoned. But I do not know that we have built any in urban Barbados as replacement for the Louis Lynch. Now, it must have been thought, like I said, advisable and needful to have a secondary school in that area. But having abandoned that particular site, no school has been again located in urban Barbados to capture young people out of those immediate vicinities around White Park Road and Country Road in the constituency of the city, and over the other side of the road to St. Michael West. Since then, in fact, we have closed one facility at Richmond and transferred the student population to St. Thomas. So we've closed one school, as far as I can recall, in St. Michael, subsequent to the abandonment of the Louis Lynch site. But we have not built any replacement. So I would like to think that those who put the school there didn't just put down a school, but they studied the needs and the requirements, population movements, the trends, and the potential student capacity, and therefore built there. Having abandoned that, I don't know that there has been any attempt to locate any other area in close proximity to that site for a replacement educational facility. Now, I have spoken about this before, and I want to challenge the honorable member for Christchurch West, my honorable friend, if he would say a word with respect to this matter, because I really would like to know where the government stands, and particularly so the Minister of Housing, the honorable Minister of Housing, who himself in a former life was a builder. And when I say builder, I mean he was into the business of building and owning buildings. And I have a concern in the land scarce context of Barbados as to the uses to which land is put and to the ownership patterns that have existed historically and continue to exist in Barbados. In a context where land is scarce, we persist seemingly very easily in exposing ourselves to foreign ownership of land property in Barbados. I am not altogether against foreign ownership, but I do hold very strongly to the view, and I really would like to hear the Honourable Minister on this, that where there is foreign ownership approved and allowed, it has to be tied to investment. And when I say investment, I'm not talking investment where you build a vacation home or villa away from your normal place of residence. You build it in sunny Barbados, in this paradise, and you come here for about 3 months a year, and you employ 2 people, one to cook when you're here and one to take care of the property when you're not here. That is very limited investment activity. I'm talking about investment that generates significant levels of employment, investment that allows for the transmission of skills and knowledge, investment that perhaps helps to further boost our export potential, and therefore our revenue generating foreign exchange potential. Now, if we continue simply to let foreigners own land in Barbados, and some in large quantities, and it is not attached to any real investment or potential investment, then I think that we are making a mistake in the context where land is scarce. And I really would like to hear the Honourable Minister of Housing on that, because I don't know that the government has spoken to that or spoken to it with clear voice. I would challenge him further if he would give a view as to that issue as it relates to domestic investment. Mr. Speaker, you don't believe in, and I don't believe in, a situation to exist in Barbados, and that situation serves our best interests if individuals or companies are allowed to own large tracts of land. Then it becomes a matter of consolidation. It can become a matter of speculation. And I think that government has a responsibility, and especially one given the mandate that this one has been given, to make sure that there is a rein on that, and that we can curb any wanton disposition to speculation and consolidation. Again, even with respect to domestic ownership, if you're going to own large tracts of land, while others can't get, while the price keeps skyrocketing and others can't pay. If you're going to own large tracts of land, it must be that you engage in some investment activity. I understand having a piece for the son and the daughter or the 6 children that you have across the space. But I don't believe that we should allow for wanton consolidation and wanton speculation to take place in a land scarce context where prices are high, people are unable to pay, mortgages hard to achieve, and the uncertainty that obtains around us with respect to those things. So I really would like to hear the voice of my honorable friend on that. I'm sure he's bold enough. I'm sure he's bold enough to stand here and say, this is what I believe, this is not a government's position, because we haven't discussed it. But this is what I believe. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And I will challenge him in his usual bold style to speak his mind. And to give Barbadians the assurance that while he holds a portfolio of housings and lands in Barbados, he will try to do his best to make sure that we don't have wanton consolidation and wanton speculation and foreign investment owning Barbados to the extent that Barbadians are shut out of the land owning class in this country. I invite him to share with us his view on these matters. I'm sure there's a very simple way of doing that without causing the government any embarrassment or any awkwardness to himself. I wonder, Mr. Speaker, if any kind of study has been done, if there are any indicators that would tell us what obtains now vis-a-vis the value of domestic ownership of land in Barbados as opposed to the value of foreign-owned land in Barbados. I wonder what the ratios are. Now, I know that the Honorable Minister of Housing is a brilliant man, having sat the common entrance at Louis Lynch, having passed the common entrance exam and went to Harrison College, having been an exhibition winner at Harrison College, and having proven himself through years of disciplined hard work to be a man of business and attended with success. And I am sure that he would understand that it would serve us well, perhaps, if we can know what is the value attaching to domestic ownership with respect to property, that attaching to foreign ownership. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Honorable member for the city of Bridgetown.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise to make some brief remarks in relation to this resolution which is before this honorable chamber. And I do so recognizing that, well, for me, this is really a lot more than the sale of property or vesting of land. And I say that because I wanted to go back. This really is the closure of what I would call an opportunistic and exciting beginning, which is the then Roebuck Secondary School, later Louis Lynch Secondary School. And then through the environmental issues and the problems that were being experienced by students and teachers, to the closure of the school. And then several years afterwards, now we are finally at a point where something is going to be happening with the property there. And I say that because I think I'm correct in saying that when the Roebuck Secondary School came into being, similarly, I think to the then Garrison Secondary School, that these two schools really catered to a number of students who were scattered at some centers around the country, and I believe that those at Roebuck were located at Block C, the Garrison. And that really was the genesis of this school in terms of the opening of the school. Previously intended to be a primary school, but then it became a secondary school. I became very familiar with the then Roebuck and the Louis Lynch Secondary School because as an officer in the Barbados Defense Force, I had a responsibility for the development of cadet companies across the country and at a lot of the newer secondary schools. So I visited on several occasions several of these schools, and I would have assisted with the company at the Llewellyn Secondary School. And one of the things that impressed me about that school, honestly speaking, when I compared it with all of the others, was the level of discipline that existed at that school. And that school was on a trajectory for excellence, in my opinion, because the children were doing quite well. They were disciplined. They were participating in a lot of extracurricular activities. And the school produced a large number of outstanding citizens to this day. I think it was most regrettable and unfortunate what happened. And I know that through those turbulent times, similarly to what was happening at Combermere School, when there were issues there, that some students probably would have gone on to other schools before, in the case of the Llewellyn Secondary School, before the closure of the school. And so it must have been a very traumatic experience at that time for students and for the members of staff of the school. But at that time also, as a person who grew up in the city of Bridgetown, and with a great love for the city of Bridgetown, Llewellyn Secondary School meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to me because it was, for me, the school that I really felt was a city school. And I say so because this provided the opportunity for a larger number of children from the city and the surrounding areas, Northwest and St. Michael, Central perhaps, to be able to go to a secondary school that was located in the city of Bridgetown. And I felt that that school and the location of that school could have provided the impetus for youngsters, young men, young women within that catchment area to be able to be afforded the opportunity for development, and development perhaps in some other ways than had existed at other secondary schools in Barbados at the time. And so when the school was closed, for me that was really a very bad experience, and it had to be for the students as well. But be that as it may, that was a decision taken at the time, and obviously that had to be the prevailing decision. But what I would say is that regrettably, the property remained there for several years. And what was, as I said, supposed to be a very opportunistic and exciting project or time became a very traumatic one. And leaving the buildings as they were and the property as it was then really did not speak well for the capital city of the country. And regrettably, as I have to agree with the Honourable Leader of the Opposition in his statement that it obviously was placed there for a particular purpose in terms of the catchment, and I believe that it would have impacted negatively the closure on those particular areas as well. But I really wanted also to take the opportunity. I would not have had that opportunity before because I was not in here, and I'm not too sure if it was ever stated, but I want to put on record the outstanding efforts and achievements, and if I may call a couple names, two names only on this occasion because I think they're deserving of it. The principal at that time, the first principal, Linda Jemmett, who was a tower of strength and who did an excellent job, and along with her deputy, John Blackman, who went on to Dighton Griffith, and then some of the teachers from that school went to Dighton Griffith, and Dighton Griffith started the same way with a level of discipline that I believe was unmatched in most schools in Barbados. And they laid a foundation, they produced excellent students, and I just wanted to say thank you very much to those persons. But for me, it was a bit more than that. And one of the sad things about the closure of the Llewellyn Secondary School and the subsequent dilapidation of the plant was the fact that the school carried the name of a very prominent Barbadian, a person who gave excellent service to this country. I'm talking about the late Louis Albert Lynch, a parliamentarian, a representative of the city of Bridgetown, and a person who started another school in this country that played a significant role for working class Barbadians, and I'm referring to the Modern High School, a school that at its zenith had about 1,700 students. And I believe that we need to do something to ensure, because that was I believe, the greatest tribute paid to Louis Lynch in terms of having the school named after him. I know there's a Louis Lynch stand in the stadium. But I believe a person who contributed so much to this country, that something needs to be done to elevate, to recognize, to give greater recognition to the name of Louis Lynch. And to have allowed the school bearing that name to be there for so long in the condition that it was, to my mind, was obviously not something that we really ought to have seen. And those are the remarks that I really want to make at this point in time. I want to say that I support the resolution, obviously. According to the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, the property is being purchased by Wibisco. And as the MP for the city of Bridgetown, I consider Wibisco to be a good corporate citizen. And Wibisco has, over the years, opened its grounds and so on to the people from the surrounding areas. And I have no doubt that that will continue, and perhaps to the greater benefit of the residents of the area. And I now go on record as having stated my undying support for this resolution. If those for remarks, Mr. Speaker, I am obliged.
Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I too rise to support the resolution. First, let me just say that I was pleased when the Honourable Minister would have sent the paper to me, certainly for comment, because as Minister of Education, I guess he would have assumed that the right thing to do was to find out whether in any way the Ministry of Education had any objection, but also to get a perspective from us as to what our future plans were in relation to the site. The lands had been handed back to the Ministry of Housing, I believe, prior to all of this, and after the incident that would have taken place there in terms of the environmental hazards at the particular site. And since that time, I think it is well known that this particular location has really been an eyesore in the city. Certainly from practicing in chambers just at the corner of White Park Road, I have had the opportunity to pass the facility on several occasions, and I, like many others too, often wondered why we were not able as a country to be able to do what was right immediately after this particular environmental incident had taken place. Now, much has been said in relation to the events that would have taken place at this institution. I don't think there's any need to rehash the difficult period that many teachers and certainly the principal at the institution would have faced at the time, and certainly all of the involvement of the respective unions in this matter. I think the record is very clear as to what transpired and how the circumstances were reacted to. But what I believe came out of this particular incident, and certainly indeed the incident arising at the Commonwealth School, was a greater need to address the issues of environmental hazards within institutions, in particular our schools, and to ensure that the environment in which people teach and certainly in which students are there to learn is indeed a safe one. And, you know, sometimes it means that bad things have to happen in order for good to happen, but I think the sensitization has served the country well. We still have a long way to go in relation to ensuring that our school plants are of a particular standard, and we've started that journey over the course of the past few years to try to get to that point. I am ever mindful that now that we have the health and safety teams at the various institutions that we've been working with them. We've started that process of working with the management teams at the schools to try to identify environmental problems early, whether it be related to chemicals, whether it be related to the noxious substances on the school compound, whether it be the smell of trees, as sometimes has been the challenge. I think Parliament would recall recently we had some issues at the Lawrence T. Gay Memorial School, and we had to move in urgently to rectify not only the sewage system, but also to rectify a number of long-standing problems at the institution. Because no matter what we tried to fix, there still seemed to be a challenge at the institution. I believe that at this point, from all reports, that matter has been resolved. We continue to do some work during this summer program on that particular institution, because I believe that it is government's responsibility, working not just as the Ministry of Education, but working in partnership with the Ministry of the Environment and the Ministry of Health as well, to wrestle these issues to the ground and to do so in as swift a manner as possible, so that there's little inconvenience to our students and certainly to our educators as well. And therefore, while we are sensitive sometimes to the concerns raised by persons operating in the environment, the truth of the matter is that there are often difficulties in pinpointing, in the early stages in particular, what exactly is the source of the problem. And we saw it recently. Certainly I can speak firsthand in relation to the Lawrence T. Gay Primary School, because we fixed various things that had been highlighted, but we were still getting concerns being expressed. And we kept going back and we kept doing things, and we still could not find a resolution of the matter. And I think we just bit the bullet and we said, let's fix everything possible. And the only thing I can think, if there are concerns going forward that can possibly arise, is that there are external factors beyond the control of certainly the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health within the actual compound of the premises. But it raises another issue, Mr. Speaker, because I hear the cries for additional institutions within the urban corridor, and I think members would also be aware that we've seen a decline in our school rolls in terms of the number of students across the entire system. But it also lends itself to a discussion as to where we place our schools, because the truth of the matter is that we have not necessarily sat down and hand-picked with precision exactly where we want to place our educational institutions in many cases. And we have therefore found ourselves with the emergence of institutions in corridors across the length and breadth of the country, which have now become challenging because there are businesses that perhaps in some cases are creating their own environmental issues on the outside of those premises. And it therefore requires that as we get ready to plan for future developments, that account is taken not simply of wanting to have a school because there are lots of children in a particular area and that it's densely populated, but rather looking at where we place our schools more strategically, bearing in mind the other factors that that often lend itself to also being considered as well. We have a number of, for instance, paint shops, mechanic shops that are situated around many of our schools. I know that there are plans in place to be able to remove some of these entities from within the communities and be able to better place them in a location where all of the operators can basically earn a living and to be able to be in one space. But the truth of the matter is that takes time. It requires also the Ministry of Housing to ensure that lands are made available wherever possible for leasing, and I know the Honourable Minister is working on identifying those lands to be able to ease some of that pressure. But we need to be very strategic in where we place those locations, because the truth is you can go most places in Barbados and you're going to find some level of residential. People are living everywhere. And therefore, we have to really be very focused in carving out not only where we place these types of business operations that are likely to be a nuisance in some cases to homeowners, but also in terms of integrating a lot of our businesses into communities as well, and in particular surrounding premises relating to our schools. So, Mr. Speaker, I am glad that this school and this piece of land is being given the opportunity to be turned over to a private entity, one that is already operational, a business operating in Barbados, a business that has been contributing to Barbados. To the best of my knowledge, it's not a foreign investor that is coming in and taking up any of our lands. And to just remind the Leader of the Opposition that this government has been focused on different levels of investment as it relates to the vesting of lands and also the use of lands in the country. So while we have a vigorous program on the cards for low-income families, we also have middle-income programs that are there for housing. We also have vigorous investment in relation to persons who have charitable organizations who want to acquire buildings to be able to improve the conditions of those buildings, because the truth is we don't have all the money as a government right now to do everything that perhaps we would like, and certainly that the honorable member would like to see us do. So we have to have a number of different avenues for being able to create investment to allow the dilapidated buildings and dilapidated spaces to be rejuvenated. And this, I believe, sir, is again testimony to a wider governmental program which seeks to focus on different levels of investment, but also different levels of rejuvenating what I consider to be an aging plant and certainly aging product. It would be remiss of me if I did not, express my disgust that this particular piece of land has been laying in this state for so long. I mean, I recall, I think shortly after we came into office, there were concerns in terms of the clearing of the land because there were a number of vagrants that had overtaken the building and its environs. And it is regrettable that decisions sometimes cannot be made more swift. It is unfortunate that it takes this long for something like this to come to fruition. I know I certainly acted quickly when the minister wrote to me, because I felt that it was high time that we needed to dispose of this asset, particularly since we did not at the time have the necessary injection to do anything else with the property. And therefore we have I know there are other projects on board for the city of Bridgetown, which I know the honorable member for the city is excited about. So it is not to say that we're taking away one piece of land, but we don't have other plans for other parcels of land. I think I want to make that abundantly clear. This is not to rob the people of the city of open spaces where housing development can be built out, but rather it is the hope from this government certainly that the purchasers will invest in this particular piece of land to expand hopefully their operations, but also to make it a site that allows for the people of the city and certainly the neighboring areas to also enjoy a better surroundings than what is presently presented. I also hear the voices that have said this morning that the name of Louis Lynch ought to be remembered perhaps in another way, in an even greater way. We name our buildings and we do so to ensure that the person's memories, are forever with us. And it is unfortunate that the memory of Robert Secondary School, the Louis Lynch Secondary School, is one that has been shrouded in controversy. Certainly not indeed the legacy with which the late educator would have wanted to be associated with. And I do feel that the Cabinet of Barbados will have to make the decision at the appropriate time in relation to being able to remember him in another way. I know that we have the stand, and I believe we have also looked at other areas. I think there's also a bust as well that has been erected in his memory. But I do feel that we cannot allow this particular site no longer to bear his name and the memory certainly of the school and his contribution to the modern high school to go in vain either. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that the support is certainly there from this chamber for this particular resolution. I look forward to what the future holds in terms of this site. I would hope that the investors pay particular attention to ensuring that the site remains clear, and certainly if they're going to knock down the buildings, that they do so as to not allow any vagrants to enter the premises or for the premises to be used for any unsatisfactory purpose, but that we can have them move swiftly to be able to do whatever development is necessary to ensure that the city of Bridgetown has some life being restored to its present premises, certainly to bring some joy to the people of the city of Bridgetown. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I beg to support the resolution.
Honourable Member St. Thomas.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I wish to add a bit of information to this discussion today, sir, and to, at the outset, commend highly all those principals and members of staff who were a part of the shaping and molding of the population at the Louis Lynch School, formerly the Roebuck Secondary. And I agree that it played a very pivotal role in helping to provide the kind of nurturing and the kind of education that was necessary for the people of Barbados. And for me, particularly working class people's children who would not perhaps have been as bright or would not have been as well cared for within homes and communities, and therefore they're not excelling the same way as some others, but they were given that opportunity at that school. I call it like a middle school, where they were able to show their talents and their worth, and they have become some of the most outstanding citizens in this country and across the world, because they're not all here in the island, as you are aware. Many of them have gone abroad and continue to do excellent service in the areas of employment that they have chosen. I recognize, and I was happy at the time being a part of the Ministry of Education, recognizing that the Louis Lynch School was the school that was cut off sometimes under St. Michael. The St. Michael School, the marks were high. But some of the students who went there had a variety of skills that they were nurtured and cared for. And I can speak proudly of students who would have passed through my hand when I was in the school system. And of course, to see how they have developed today to be some of the most profound citizens in this society and beyond. And I know what those principals did. They had made tremendous sacrifice. I would not be able to remember all of the names, but I think there were like 4 or 5 principals, all of whom did their best to be able to produce citizens of this country, not only educationally, but socially and morally, and all the other aspects of the fabric that we expect our citizens to display and to give back to this society. I also recognize, sir, that Ms. Darlene, what I believe the last principal at that school, and she ensured that the service that was extended from all the previous principals reached down and were continued to help to nurture these individuals. I know that the children were doing so well. They were doing all of the sciences and so on, like the other older secondary schools. And the ministry at that time determined that they will cover what we call the quadrangle of the school, to be able to have the students do prayers in that area, because when we had rainy weather, they just had to use corridors and use their various classrooms, and there's nothing wrong with that, because when they went to school, the school was so small for the 705 students at Holy Innocents that we had to use similar corridors as well. But these are new times, and children need space, and they're grown children and not primary school children, so they needed that space. And that $4 million was invested, and immediately after, all of the rumors and all of the concerns, because some of the concerns of parents and guardians, of teachers, and of the students themselves were so important to the then Ministry of Education, of which I was a part, that we made sure that we pursued all of the investigations necessary, because the unions were concerned. And I believe that unions have their roles to play. I was a part of the executive of the Barbados Union of Teachers as well when I was in the classroom. And I know that we have to go out there and make cases for our constituents, particularly when we recognize that there are challenges. And while I will not say that there were very large numbers, because I do not have the statistics in that respect, I know that a couple of teachers and students displayed challenges, and 1 or 2 of them would have passed. Similarly, all the other schools are having that now. St. Leonard's girls had some similar reports coming through, and therefore to have closed the school, having gone through the investigations with the University of the West Indies and all the reports that they had given, the school has been closed, and that is now history. But I want to say proudly too that the daughter of our late right Honorable Prime Minister Professor Owen Arthur, Sabrina, is one of the excellent projects of the Louis Lake School, and she represented Barbados in table tennis across the world, having not played a single ball or held a racket to play table tennis when she was a student at Sherwin Primary where I was. So it says that the school does have a wonderful history, and we need to continue to work towards ensuring that our schools and our other spaces of work are environmentally sound, and that when there are challenges, that the investigations take place and that the government or whichever institution there is responsible acts with clarity and to be speedy with alacrity to be able to make sure that we nip it in the bud, because any life that is lost or any suffering is a family, a community, an institution that will have to look after the care and concerns of those individuals. I also want to say, Mr. Speaker, that the Honorable Leader of the Opposition queried another school, and of course the Louis Lake School would be central, and most people would take one bus or one trip to Bridgetown, and therefore it really met those needs. But because of the closure of the school, we did have to do the transfers, and let it not be said that children were only transferred to an older secondary school or a newer secondary school. They were transferred to schools within the communities where they lived, and they have continued to do well. I had a niece who was a part of the Louis Lake School at that time, and she finished her education in Allen School, and she has done very well. So it was not that the children were disenfranchised in any way. Parents were invited to have their children schooled in the communities where they live or closest to where they live, to avoid trafficking into Bridgetown all the time, and then problems with the transport and challenges with children not going to school and being truant and different things overtaking their lives. So when the Honourable Member queried about another school, I don't even know if we need to now build more secondary schools in the same way that we did when families had 8 and 10 and 15 children. And the population of those who were in the schools, especially at common entrance, were 4,000 odd going into 5,000. The Honourable Minister of Education will probably indicate to us the number of children now who are right in the common entrance, and they're probably just bordering on 3,000. So it says that more than 1,000 spaces are now out as a result of smaller populations, and we know that families are not as large in all areas as was the past when I was a child, or when I was in the ministry, or even now, where families are looking at one child, sometimes 2, sometimes none at all, because most of our women in particular who would have climbed that ladder and recognized the challenges they had, they are saying, I am following my career, I don't really need to have children. And perhaps some men are saying that as well. We don't know the reason, and I'm not going to speak anything else to that except to say that the secondary schools are not as populated now as perhaps the Honourable Member may be seeing it, but I believe that schools should have manageable numbers in order for principals to be able to manage them. And I can speak of what I'm seeing at St. George Secondary. The numbers are manageable, the children are working well. You do not hear many reports about them like in the past, because the management of the schools and the staff and the parents are working together to change that whole culture. The other thing I wish to say, sir, is that a lot of people are now gravitating towards private schools as well, because some of them feel and of the opinion, and they have their privilege, and I'm happy with that, that the schooling at the private school is more within what they would want for their children, for them to be able to accelerate and so on and so forth. The numbers are smaller, therefore, and so the calls for secondary school positions may not be the same. But what I can say in relation to children at that secondary level is that we as a society need to place more focus on working with children who are late developers. Children who, in the past, we determined that when they reach classes 2 and 3 and the investigations were done and we found out that they were scoring 30% or less, that those children deferred right in the common entrance. And it saddens my heart to see that some children who are getting 10% and so over the last 12 or so years were going into schools at secondary level, not being able to read and write, not being able to do mathematics in the way we would like. And if the teaching, and if the Earlston Teachers Training College is not turning out as many people, or if they're not accessing the training in the same way, and as a society that is growing, we're saying you can come to teach if you have your degree from at the University of the West Indies or wherever. But unless you do that training component that the Earlston Teachers Training College offers, we are going to have more challenges in this society. One has to go through the training, do the psychology, do all aspects of it, be able to work with children who have special needs. Gifted children are children with special needs because they accelerate with their learning, and therefore you have to give them a new aspect of teaching and have more work prepared for them than children who are slower that you have to give in small bites. So unless those who are the teachers and the tutors get that opportunity to be able to do the necessary training, to do the psychology and all aspects of it, then our children are going to fall through the cracks. And we are seeing so many of our children who have gone into secondary school scoring 8%, 20%, and so on, and those programs within the schools are not catering to their needs. Those are the children who become frustrated. They want to go home. They want to go on the block. They want to stay away and play truant because they're not coping. And there's nothing more painful, Mr. Speaker, for your children to come home with a report that says 15% slow, 8% can do better, and a lot of nonsense, excuse me, sir, that you see on your children's reports coming in from some schools where you can tell these children need special programs, remedial programs to be able to put them in place. And I'm glad that the ministry is trying to determine how to do some summer programs to help to strengthen those children who fall between the cracks or because of whatever childhood illnesses they may have had. Some of them may have had a fall, had to spend time in hospital for 3 months or 4 months with problems with adenoids and hearing problems, and so those children will not be able to perform as quickly or as readily as other children who would have been there, whose parents sit at home and work with them. And that is another problem. A lot of people are using textbooks, and that is what is impacting. So my position today, because I know I'll get a chance to speak on education at some time if the Lord spares my life, but my position today is I believe that we now should be focusing, and I know that is the government's plan in the making, on special schools. Special meaning not only for challenged children, because challenged children need a better deal as well, but for children who are late developers, or you call it slow learners, or children who have special areas of interest. And we keep, as adults, parents and teachers, having boys in the class, 15 boys, because the boys' numbers are really growing as well. I'm not so sure what's happening there with the population. But having 15 boys and 6 girls in the class and write a story about something that will attract a girl's attention. My hopping ball. Or something, we need to be more creative in what we do. If we're not doing it well, where boys are expected to write stories that you know. Let the boys write something about an airplane, about a motorcycle, because that is the interest, about making a kite and things of that nature. A lot of that is not happening. And Mr. Speaker, you know, I speak from a background of knowledge now, not from the school's end, but I had 4 grandchildren in my house, and I worked with them. And some of the things I saw, my eyes went, is this what is happening? But I never interfered because you will hear, well, because she's this or that. But I know what to expect, so I did it myself. But I can't do it forever. I did it in the communities around where I live because I saw the challenges that these children were experiencing. So I would be in favor of any set of institutions, perhaps 2 or so, but start with one because the funds are not going to be available in the same way now that we're into COVID and all that, and unemployment so high, we have to look after our families as well. But I am strongly in favor of an Alma Parish school, that the last administration shut it down, and those children were transferred to schools, and the newer secondary schools across the island cannot cope, but they wanted to do, they had a special need for culinary skills. That opportunity didn't come. I had the wonderful experience, I call it, Mr. Speaker, sir, for a young man who I had nurtured. And he was ill, and I said, "You're coming to my house to stay." That young man had so many skills, but he was working as a general worker. And I said, "You sit here, don't let me see you leave this house today." He went into my backyard, Mr. Speaker, with paints and whatever else he had. And he did some hand paintings. And when he came home, he said, "Look what I did today. I could not believe it." He said, "Aunt, I had those interests all the time, but the school I went to, it was just maths and English, and I just could not cope." But his strength was that. And you know what, Mr. Speaker? Today, he's one of the best mechanics Barbados could want because he had a different form of education. And he had the innate abilities to use his hands. He needed to do the maths and English, yes, but that is all you're doing. You cannot touch and develop those skills. So I want to close, Mr. Speaker, because those children need care. We must have another similar school so that our children who have other interests besides the math and the English, and so they have other strengths, and I said other innate abilities, that we need to find them and to tap them and to be able to have those facilities where they can go to do the technical and vocational skills on the same school's compound. It doesn't have to be at the level of other schools, but, and let me digress a little bit to say as well, Mr. Speaker, that over a 25-year period of the Barbados Lumber Company having an annual exhibition, and the technical and vocational skills were the hallmark of what those youth students were doing. Every year, the newer secondary schools cut the prizes. The St. Lucie Secondary, the St. George Secondary. Ellerslie would have gotten a little bit too. Princess Margaret. And all of those that we consider to be newer secondary schools, they were always the ones. And when you go to those schools, those trophies and everything else are there in cupboards that everybody could see the excellence of those students whom others would have cast aside because they were not academically sound. I would not even say it was academically sound too, Mr. Speaker. I would say I'm a late developer too. So when you give up on children, you kill off all their dreams. And I want to support another school or the Alma Parish School to be again established to cater to the needs of those boys and girls who went there. And many of them are in this society and they have their own hair salons. They have their own valet services. They have become carpenters and bakers and florists and everything else because that is what their innate abilities are, God-given. But now, where are they? Some of them on the streets. Sad to say, some of them are in prison. Some of them may be car washers. Some of them may be working in the transport sector because there's a niche cut out there for all of them. And the other side of this whole educational business, when we're talking now about the school in a more peripheral way, I'll say, those children who have challenges are people too. And we really need to step back and see how best we can make plans for them. And once I have the life in my body, here or anywhere else, and I have the capacity, I will be in the vanguard of working with those institutions because those children who have those challenges are people too, and they matter. And this government will continue to work with them to make the difference. So I close, Mr. Speaker, by saying that the late Louis Lynch, I would have been a product of the Modern High School, and I therefore want to thank not only Mr. Louis Lynch because I was never a child who would get into his face because he would share real licks, but those teachers with whom I interacted, that they were able to help me build on the foundation that the Holy Innocent School under the late Lester Vaughan would have laid for me and for thousands of others. And so I highly commend him for his entrepreneurial spirit to be able to develop a school, to have those large numbers of children, and the emphases that were placed in sports. So the Patsy calendars and so on, they came through the modern high school and they made it and are serving those who are still alive in this society to the best of their ability. And so I support this resolution, Mr. Speaker, and I would want to finally say, early in the year, persons who were working at the National Assistance Board had only come in that morning just around 8 o'clock to carry out their duties, the porter messenger and 2 others. And as soon as they got into the vehicle, a man came through from the same Louis Lynch environs, where the school is now, the dilapidated school, with a gun, pushed it in the man's face. As soon as he sat in the seat, he dragged the key out of the ignition, and he held the gun in the face. He robbed them of his little jewelry and so on, carried away a couple things from the van, and left everybody there dumbfounded. And what hurt me most, one man who was sitting in the back, a member of the staff, he is a deaf person. He was so afraid. For days, that man was shaking in his boots. And as a result of it, and we made a visit, we saw the squalor that is over at the backyard of the National Assistance Board that is now that Louis Lynch School. And therefore, I am happy to know that the government is planning to dispose of it and to learn that the entity that wishes to do the purchasing will look towards ensuring that whatever is done there will be integrated in the communities surrounding the environs there, to be able to do something productive to uplift the people of the city of Bridgetown, where I believe that those persons living in green fields and those adjoining communities will be able to get the opportunity not only to find employment, but to be able to recreate and to call that space there with the new owners their own, because that is what we want to do. We want to see the integration of communities and other entities to be able to build and make sure that that eyesore is no longer there, but that something positive will come out of that particular exercise that we are pursuing today. And so, Mr. Speaker, I lend my support to this resolution, and I pray that whatever takes place there will be to the positive benefit of this society, particularly the people of the city of Bridgetown in particular.
Honourable Member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. You know, this first started out as a housing debate and morphed into an education debate. And I do understand that, because schools are very near and dear to our hearts. Indeed, it is the basis and the foundation on which many people build their whole lives. And when the Honourable Member for St. Thomas, member that just took her seat, spoke about that young man who had those still skills other than maths and English, and those manual dexterity skills, it cast my mind back to what I often would tell my then woodwork and metalwork teacher as I meet them from time to time as I go about my business here. And what it is this. And after being an oral and maxillofacial surgeon for 30 years, January of 2022 will be 30 years that I had worked as an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. And I would often look at them and tell them, you know, even although I did the maths, the physics, the chemistry, the biology, the biochemistry, and all those other things, the skills that I learned in woodwork and metalwork are the skills that I use every single day as a surgeon, more so than all of those other skills put together. And it brings home how important it is to have a well-rounded education for all of our children. Not only to be focusing on maths, on physics, on chemistry, on biology, but also to encourage them to improve their manual dexterity skills, their language skills, Mr. Speaker, how many times in my former life I would meet a patient that only spoke Spanish or only spoke French, and I had to call on the Spanish and the French that I learned, sometimes mixing up the two, I must admit, because I learned them simultaneously. I know to mix up the Spanish word with the French word. But how many times I had to call on those skills to be able to communicate with people. So I fully agree that a well-rounded education is the basis on which all of our students must get an opportunity. I also want to respond to a few matters that the member for St. Michael West brought up. And the first one is this, and he tried to call me out on what my views are on land policy and land ownership as it relates to foreign ownership and local ownership and these kinds of things. The only thing I could say is this, Mr. Speaker. You know, when you become a minister of the government, there are certain benefits in being called a minister, but you also give up certain rights as well. And one of those rights is everything you say becomes a policy of the government. And I really could not be so far-fetched and so reckless as to come to this honorable chamber and give my views as what it has to respect to land ownership in Barbados without somebody construing it as being a policy of the government. And that I certainly would not be drawn into.
Honourable members.
But, Mr. Speaker, certainly the honourable member must be misleading the House. Because if what he's saying is to be taken at face value, he's saying to us that after 3.5 years, he does not know anything about this government's policy with respect to land ownership and foreign investment. After 3.5 years, he is saying he can't speak to that because he may be at odds with what is government's position and he is unaware of what that position is. After 3.5 years, they don't have a policy on that, Mr. Speaker. He must be misleading us. That can't be true.
Mr. Speaker, I clearly am not misleading the House. There is, as far as I understand it, there is no bar to foreign ownership in Barbados. And I am not aware of any change in that policy at this time. But the honourable member wanted me to give my personal opinion. I am fairly sure that that is what he asked me for. He went through that I am a Barbados exhibition winner, that I went to Harrison College, I took my exam, and so on and so on. And he wanted my personal opinion. And what I was trying to explain to the honourable member and to the House, that when you become a minister of government, you kind of give up that personal opinion, opportunity to speak in public on personal matters. And that is what I was trying to convey to him. With respect to foreign investment, as I understand it, there is no bar to foreign ownership of land in Barbados. If there's anybody who knows anything different, please say. But as I understand it, there's no bar to foreign investment in Barbados. Unlike other countries. In other countries, there is a bar to foreign investment, but there's none in Barbados. In fact, I am well aware that there are many, many people and companies who have benefited from selling properties to foreign people. And that money was then turned for further investment in the country. So that is with respect to that matter. With respect to the matter of new schools, the honourable member for St. Thomas answered that quite aptly, and I have to fully agree with her. And we go back again to the same when I took the 11 plus. When I took the 11 plus examination, there were 5,300 odd students that took it. The 11 plus examination is going to be sat in a matter of days, and I understand it's 3,200 tomorrow. 3,200, 3,300. So what has happened is, and it goes to the further point that the census is so important, because we have to know what you're dealing with in order to plan for the future. And this is why the census, I understand the census date is August 1st, 2nd, something like that. So the census is important because you have to understand what you have to know what you plan for in the future. And the planning for additional schools could not be of such importance in the urban school, and this is obviously why there was no further plan for another urban school, because the need, and in terms of the number of people going into secondary school, has reduced. And it's because our population has not been replaced as appropriately as it should have been. And this is another issue that is not new. We all know that our population has not increased in the numbers that it should have increased. And therefore, the need for more schools primary, secondary, whatever, is not at the level that we would have expected. And all of this will be borne out as we get the results from the census. So those were obviously the main 2 points that the honorable member brought up. But I just want to say one other thing. And I go back to this. You know, many times in government, we often think that government is only to legislate. But that is not true. Government does what I call frill: facilitate, regulate, innovate, and legislate. And it has all 4 of these opportunities at its disposal. Yes, government is legislate, and we are all in here legislators, and we spend the vast majority of our time when we come here to Parliament to legislate. But that is not the only thing. We must also see ourselves as facilitators, facilitating investment, be it local, foreign, facilitating industries. We must also see ourselves as regulators, regulating where things are done. And it brings me to the other point the honourable member brought up as to what will be done and whether how it would be used. That really is not my purview. That is under the Town and Country Planning and Environmental Protection Department. Suffice to say, they've already gave their approval for even light industry to be approved for that location. So facilitate, regulate. Another thing that government must do is innovate. And I think that our innovation, and the honourable member for the Minister of Education spoke about what we're doing with respect to land and trying to control the price of land by doing our housing, the HOPE program for HOPE Premium, be it 4,000 to 8,000, the HOPE Direct, 2,000 to 4,000, and about to launch a new program shortly, which the Prime Minister, in fact, has been talking about already, but we haven't launched it yet. That is going to call HOPE Advance, which is for 1,000 to 2,000. So people are, and we are controlling the cost of land as well by using the Ministry of Transport Works and Maintenance to put in the roads as best we can, keeping the prices of land down, trying to bring that price of land back down so that every single person who wants to get a home can get a home. And this is what we're trying to do as much as our resources will allow. So there's lots that I'm doing. There's lots that this government is doing and has done over the past 3.5 years. Have we achieved every single thing? No, because we've had what? We've had what I call the trifecta. We've had the hurricane, we've had the pandemic, and we've had the ash. But in spite of all of that, when I look around Barbados, when I see the amount of roads that were done, when I see the buses, when I see all of the infrastructure that is going in now at what was another dilapidated building, the National Insurance Building, and what we're doing there, when I see the amount of greening that is going on, when I see what is going on at the Botanical Gardens, when I look at all of the opportunity for university students to go back to university, when I look at all the things that this government has done with all of the other problems associated that they had to deal with, I have to look and say, and it's not biased, this government has worked hard and done well in 3.5 years. And I look forward to continuing to work assiduously to keep my head up high and keep Barbados proud, because this government is a working government. With all those few words, Mr. Speaker, I beg again that this resolution do not pass.
The question is that this resolution do not pass. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This resolution now stands passed.
Order number 5, sir. In the name of the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, to move the second reading of the Ministers and Parliamentary Secretaries Conditions of Service Amendment Bill 2021.
Honourable member for St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, there are 3 bills on today's order paper. I think order number 4 and order number 6, all of which touch on concern the subject matter. and I would therefore seek leave of you, Your Honor, and the Chamber to have a cognate debate of same.
The question is that orders number 4, 5, and 6 constitute a cognate debate because they're inextricably linked. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I imagine that those individuals who trouble themselves to look at the parliaments or the paper would, in some respects, have found themselves in a situation where they would have been more than a little surprised. Surprised because, Mr. Speaker, there is a feeling or an attitude which suggests that members of parliament and cabinet ministers have the benefit of all manner of things. I reflect, sir, on my first term in cabinet, 2003 to 2008. And I remember saying to my permanent secretary at that time that I was thinking of taking a week or two of holiday. And he said to me, well, Minister, when are you traveling? And I said to him in response, well, I am not traveling. I just plan on taking some holiday here. And he looked at me with a fairly quizzical look, as though I was not only talking foolishness, but that I ought to have known that I was talking foolishness. So I asked him, well, what happened? I don't quite understand why you asked the question. He said, well, Minister, perhaps they did not tell you, but ministers have no right to a holiday. And the only time that someone else can fulfill their role as minister is if they are either sick or out of the jurisdiction. I could not believe what I was hearing. As a lawyer, I spent many a day in my early practice defending the right of my clients who were employees not only to have a holiday, but that the Holidays with Pay Act, which said that you have to have at least 14 days notice of being told to take a holiday and so on, were to be strictly followed. I did not know then what to make of it, but it meant that if I wanted to take time off to physically recuperate, that I had to leave the island and could not stay in Barbados and enjoy a little relaxation as most other people could. This situation has been the law of Barbados, Your Honor, since independence, and it continues to this date. I don't want to suggest that the current cabinet of Barbados is so battle weary that we are in need of rest. In fact, every face I see of cabinet in this chamber looks more than fresh. Well, I can see that half of your visages are obscured. But sir, there are some things that I think we take for granted. Yesterday we celebrated the Day of National Significance and talked about and in many respects celebrated the conditions of workers and of Barbadians at that time, and the achievements that we've taken for granted, perhaps. And one of those things, sir, is what we consider to be an inalienable right to something called a holiday, which, when my foreparents were working in the sugar industry, they did not have. They worked 6 days a week and had Sundays off. There were no things called bank holidays that they could stay at home and enjoy a little respite. We've come a long way since then, but I regret to say that we've not come a long way since then in respect of the members of cabinet. So, Mr. Speaker, we in this chamber who are on the front bench, none of us will have had a holiday of any kind since coming to Parliament in May of 2018. I think if my doctor knew that, he would scold me in the worst possible of ways. I suspect that's quite possible. We therefore come to this chamber today, sir, to correct something that I can't say was an oversight, but I can say it has been a grievous omission, and an omission that we have the power to fix, but perhaps have never had the courage to fix it. For myself, sir, I have labored night and day over the last 3 years, catching a little rest when I could, which was hardly ever. And I know this to be the situation that every single one of my colleagues face. We have our day-to-day responsibilities of minister, which takes up so much of our time that there's none left. And then we have the overarching responsibility of being a member of Parliament, which then requires us to do the work at a constituency level. And then whatever time is left, sir, we carve it out for our family and friends and try to keep body and soul together. This is not about a plea for empathy or even sympathy, sir. It is a simple reality that we face, that for too long we have labored in an environment that is not only unhealthy, but it is impractical. So we come to Parliament today not, I hope, to engage in any major debate, because I think it is so obvious that you wonder why it wasn't done before. It is an incredible burden to place on a person to say, if you want a holiday, you have to travel, because that brings with it attendant costs and so on. While other people can look forward to their 2 or 3 or 4 weeks staying at home and perhaps just relaxing a little bit to keep body and soul together. So we are here today, sir, to amend the Ministers and Parliamentary Secretaries Remuneration and Allowances Act to provide, Mr. Speaker, that the holder of an office set out in column 1 of the schedule is entitled to 4 weeks paid vacation annually for every complete year of service. It also will provide, Mr. Speaker, that you'll be able to take, if this bill is passed, I hope it is, your annual vacation in different periods. So you're not bound to take it all one time. You can take a week at Christmas, a week at Easter, and then 2 weeks in December. These are things, sir, that every other Barbadian thinks are matters of course. In relation to arranging for our vacation leave, Mr. Speaker, it will be provided when the bill is passed that we will make an application to the Prime Minister. The ministers and parliamentary secretaries will make an application to the Minister for the requisite amount of leave. And presumably, the gracious Prime Minister will agree. The Prime Minister herself will apply to the Governor General for the benefit of holiday, or President when that time comes. But as it is Governor General. This legislation, sir, will therefore give us something that we have not had at all since 1966. Mr. Speaker, we will also require an amendment to the Governor General Conditions of Service Amendment Act to provide in similar terms that the Governor General is entitled to 4 weeks vacation leave. And that vacation leave can be taken in one or more periods if the Governor General and Prime Minister so agree. It also goes on to provide, Mr. Speaker, currently the Governor General gets the benefit of first class leave passage to someplace outside of Barbados. But in a situation where the Governor General wishes to stay in Barbados, we propose, sir, that the Governor General will be able to spend that holiday at the government's expense in accommodation at such rate as befits the office of Governor General. We are also changing, Mr. Speaker, the Constitution because in order to ensure that the ministerial portfolios are still carried by an individual, we want to ensure that the constitutional arrangements are put in place for that. So, for example, and I hate to use my own situation, but as Attorney General, if I am on leave, if I am on vacation, if I'm on the island, the responsibility of Attorney General must be assigned to somebody else because under the Constitution, the executive of Barbados must be constituted by, at the very outset, a Prime Minister and an Attorney General. And therefore, while on holiday in Barbados, the current situation is I can't be. As long as I am in Barbados, I have to carry out the role of Attorney General. If I travel, it's assigned to somebody else. In this scenario, an Attorney General would be permitted to take his holiday or her holiday in Barbados. But constitutionally, the responsibilities of the portfolio of Attorney General would be able to be performed by someone else without affecting the substantive position. So, and I only use the Attorney General because that's a case where you must have an Attorney General and you must have a Prime Minister. But in the case of any other minister, this Constitution will not, this amendment will permit the assignment of the responsibility to another person, and that person can be from the Senate, it doesn't matter, but it still would not affect your substantive post that the post holder will have. So, Mr. Speaker, I think that these amendments to these 3 pieces of legislation are eminently sensible. I think that they're obvious. And I believe if you ask any member of the public, there was a famous legal case called the Moorcock, which talked about implied terms in the contract of employment. Well, implied terms, and it said that...
Your officials bystander.
Who, sir?
Yes, sir.
I'm glad you recollect.
Yes, sir.
Who when asked the question, but isn't it obvious what would have been intended? And the response would be, but of course it's obvious that that's what had been intended. In fact, it was so obvious that we didn't feel we needed to say it. And I believe that any aspiring politician would, if asked about holiday, would say, well, it's so obvious that you don't need to say it. But of course, sir, it is never as obvious as it seems. So we're asking this honorable chamber to join with us in agreeing that henceforth, well, not henceforth, but after the passage of the legislation and coming into force, ministers, parliamentary secretaries, and the Governor General, soon to be replaced by the President, will be entitled to have the benefit in law of annual holiday of 4 weeks, but in a situation where they are not compelled to engage in the artifice of getting on a plane just to be able to get a few days off. I believe, sir, that whenever the Prime Minister agrees that they can take a holiday, they don't want to travel, they want to do some gardening. I have some painting that I believe my wife wants me to do. In fact, I suspect that you know, we may think that we're going to get a holiday, but our respective partners probably have other plans in mind. But sir, I ask that the Chamber joins with us in supporting these three pieces of legislation. As I said, it's been with us since independence. And the time has come for us, sir, to grapple with what is so obvious a need and so obvious a change. And I therefore beg to move that these bills be read a second time.
The bill, one bill at a time, Honorable.
I beg to move that the Ministers and Parliamentary Secretaries Remuneration Allowance Act be read a second time.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I doubt you will find many people who would argue with that which appears to be just and right. And those who work hard are deserving of proper remuneration, which is in many cases in Barbados not the reality, and they're properly deserving of rest. If on behalf of the government, the Honorable Member of St. Joseph is saying that members are tired and need a rest because they've been working hard, then that is a just call with which many will not argue once they're persuaded that those who are subjects of this legislation have indeed been working hard in the service of the people. If the Honorable Member St. Joseph is saying that we're tired and we need a rest, then that is but just. And Parliament can make it proper and appropriate that just rest be given. Of course, the electorate always also has a power to do that. And having gone 3.5 years, as the Honorable Member said, without a vacation, without a rest, I suppose they can wait another 12 months because we believe that opportunity would come within that period of time within which the electorate can exercise the power to grant rest to those who serve in its cause. That has happened just yesterday, not far from us, Mr. Speaker, and perhaps it portends somewhat with respect to what might happen here. We don't want to speculate and get into all of that. We don't want to speculate and get into all of that. We're simply saying if you work hard, you're deserving of proper pay, which in my view you're not getting. In my view, you're not getting. And if you deserve a rest, then it needs to be properly provided for. And I don't know that anybody will argue against that cause. All you have to do is establish that those who get the pay and get the rest have indeed been working hard. The issue I have with the bills, Mr. Speaker, it has to do with language, and these debates are often difficult when they involve the office of the Governor General, the head of state of the country. But the issue is in the language used in the legislation, that with respect to the ministers and parliamentary secretaries, and specifically as it relates to the Prime Minister in Section 4, that is, and subsection 3. The Prime Minister wishes to be granted vacation leave. He shall make application in writing to the Governor General, setting out the date of the commencement and termination of the period of leave. I am not a lawyer, and I suppose I can be persuaded, if the effort is made to do so, I can be persuaded that that language suggests that that application is genuinely an application which must be approved by the Governor General. Now, we got to be careful when we use this phrasing, and it has to be clear to John public out there, It has to be clear to every member in here as well. Just to use an example of which you're fully well aware, many times in the legislation of this parliament and this land, we talk about consultation taking place between Prime Minister and others, Prime Minister and Governor General, Prime Minister lead the opposition, and consultation amounts to a written letter saying it is my intention to do so, and that's the end of story. Now, I just want to know what specifically the language here is intending to say. He shall make application in writing to the Governor General. Is that clearly suggesting that it is in the power of the Governor General to refuse a request, an application for vacation leave by the Prime Minister? Now, when you get to the legislation that speaks to the changes, read the office of the Governor General, at section 2, section 14, subsection 3, subject to the approval of the Prime Minister, and under such conditions as the Prime Minister specifies, the Governor General may spend his vacation leave within or outside of Barbados. Are we suggesting, therefore, by the language, that it is in the power of the Prime Minister to say to the Governor General, you cannot spend this vacation in Barbados, you cannot spend this vacation outside of the Barbados? Does the legislation give power to the Prime Minister to make prescription with reference to the vacation leave of the Governor General in definitive terms, whereas with reference to the application from the Prime Minister to the Governor General, his or her vacation, it to me is left open to interpretation as to what the power of the office of the Governor General is vis-a-vis that of the Prime Minister. Now, I think that the office of the head of state must be respected. I do not know if there are any incidents in recent past or during the period of this Parliament sitting over the past few years. Do not know if there have been any anomalies of behavior on either side with respect to these two offices that may have occasioned this language and this legislation. I don't know. I will not speculate. As I said, it's very difficult to speak with reference to the matter of the office of the Governor General in this public way, and I would not in any way seek to or attempt to say anything that would in any way reflect negatively on the office of the Governor General or on the incumbent herself or on the office of the Prime Minister or the incumbent herself. I'm simply saying it seems to me that we're speaking a little bit differently with respect to how these matters on vacation leave for these two subjects, how this matter is treated, and clarity perhaps can be better given.
Member St. Joseph.
Yes, Mr.
Member,
Speaker.
could you turn off your mic?
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Leader of the Opposition, the Honourable Member, for his support. I note his query in respect of what appears to him to be a potential for limitation on the exercise of the right to vacation by the Governor General. Mr. Speaker, the Constitution provides already a large number of instances where decisions to be taken by the Governor General must be taken in consultation with and upon the advice of the Governor General. I believe, sir, that in this instance the possibility is quite remote. But the fact is, sir, that under the law as it stands, the only stipulation is that the Governor General can travel outside of Barbados with the expense of the government for herself and eligible persons with a first-class ticket. That's all. So if the Governor General chooses to go on a trip for her annual holiday to Trinidad or to St. Lucia, then that is it. There's no first class ticket to be had. On the other hand, if she decides to go to a holiday in Bahrain, then there will be a first class ticket to be paid. But in these circumstances, Mr. Speaker, we really want to provide a more meaningful opportunity for holiday arrangements, but there are financial consequences to that which have to be worked out. And therefore, this provision, which would see arrangements being made for a holiday at a place other than a government house, would require, sir, some discussion between Her Excellency or whoever the incumbent is and the Prime Minister from time to time. In any event, Mr. Speaker, I remind the Chamber that we are committed to move towards a non-executive president within the next few months, and therefore, if there are any deficiencies arising in this scenario, they will very likely be drawn to the attention of the Chamber so that any challenges might be adequately corrected or adjusted when we amend the Constitution to make provision for the establishment of a president, and at which time this particular statute will once again have to be visited by the Chamber. So I'm giving the member the assurance that this is not in any way an attempt to create any issues vis-a-vis the Governor General and the accessing of any benefit. And in any event, if there is a concern, we still have an opportunity to revisit in the very, very near future. And with those words in response, sir, I again ask that this bill, the Ministers and Parliamentary Secretaries Representation Allowances Act, be read a second time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
Question is that Clause 1 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
Question is that Clause 2 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, all those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 3 stand part.
Question is that Clause 3 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 4 stand part.
Question is that Clause 4 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited as the Ministers and Parliamentary Secretaries Remunerations and Allowances Amendment Act 2021.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This is a matter involving the Constitution.
No, we're not
Not
there
this
yet.
one.
We're not there yet. Order number 4, sir.
Mr.
In the name-
Speaker, oh, sorry.
In the name of the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, to move the second reading of the Governor General Conditions of Service Amendment Bill 2021.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the Governor General Conditions of Service Amendment Act 2021 be read a second time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
Speaker, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
Question is that Clause 1 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
Question is that Clause 2 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do not report as under the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Governor General Conditions of Service Amendment Act 2021.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
Order number 6, sir. In the name of the Honorable Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs, to move the second reading of the Constitution Amendment Bill 2021.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
The question is that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that you do not leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of the bill.
The question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it.
This House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 1 stand part.
Question is that Clause 1 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that Clause 2 stand part.
Question is that Clause 2 stand par. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clause 3 stand part.
Question is that clause 3 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 4.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that clause 4 stand part.
Question is that clause 4 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Madam Chair, I beg to move that you do now report is under the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committee has reported the passing of one bill in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
Question is that the aforementioned bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Yes. You call.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited, the Constitutional Amendment Act 2021.
Mr. Speaker, as you are aware, this bill is being passed in accordance with Section 49 of the Constitution, and therefore requiring a 2/3 majority of all the members present and voting. You will also recall that when we did the amendments to allow for a virtual sitting, that those members who are coming in virtually can also vote. And normally we would have done a division and we will ring the bell. We don't have a bell here, but for those members who are online or who are possibility of coming in online, we have sent an email asking them that when this division is called, that they could then vote. Presently we have 2 members coming in online. And what I will do is I will start with the members here and give those who are not here enough time to come in online if they so choose. Ms. Bradshaw.
Aye.
Mr. Marshall.
Aye.
Ms. Ford.
Aye.
Dr. Duguid.
Aye.
Lieutenant Colonel Bostick.
Aye.
Mr. Griffith.
Aye.
Your Honor, Mr. Rowe.
Aye.
Reverend Ahley. Ms. Husbands. Mr. Weir.
Aye.
Mr. Abrams.
Aye.
Mr. Phillips.
Aye.
Mr. Strawn.
Aye.
Mr. Jordan.
Aye.
Mr. King.
Aye.
Dr. Brown.
Aye.
Mr. Sutherland. Mr. Toppin. Mr. Humphrey. Mr. Ford. Mr. Prescott. A little louder, please. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, we now go to those who are online, and once their name is called, they ask to unmute their mic. Mr. Simmons.
Aye.
Ms. Moore.
Aye.
Mr. Speaker, the results of the division: 23 honorable members voted in favor, 21 who were here physically, and 2 online, therefore reaching the threshold of the 2/3 of 20 required for passage by this bill.
In conformity with the Constitution, this bill now stands passed.
Mr. Speaker, with that, we've come to the end of today's sitting. I therefore beg to move the suspension of the sitting, the adjournment of the House, sorry, until the 10th of August at 10 a.m.
Beg a second.
The question is that this honorable chamber stands adjourned until the Tuesday, the 10th day of August at 2021 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 10th day of August at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.